Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Films and Stuff podcast. I'm Ethan, as always, joined by most valuable Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up?
Not much. Excellent, Ethan. How are you?
Doesn't have the same ring to it, but I'll take it. Today, it is the weekly stream or skip episode. We know the rules. Listeners know the rules. For the newly initiated, Pete, give them the 15-minute summary of what is stream or skip.
Absolutely. So Ethan and I have prepared lists of TV shows and movies for each other. We watch at least 2 episodes or 30 minutes of the movie. And on that basis, we determine if that movie or TV show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
You could think of us as in the medieval times, we are the court jester or the court taster.
Food taster, that's right.
The food taster responsible for making sure that there's no anthrax. We are your taste testers, dear listeners. And Pete, this week you selected for me something on Apple TV Plus that I've actually been pretty interested about. Masters of the Air, which is brought to you by the creators of Band of Brothers and The Pacific.
Oh, you're
kidding.
kidding.
You get a good sense of where this is going. It is a World War II limited TV miniseries, meaning it's only 9 episodes, and it is about a squadron of, instead of fighter pilots, it is the folks that fly the big bombers, the flying fortresses. So they are stationed outside of London, and they are doing bombing missions over Nazi Germany in World War II. And I have to say, you know, I am not a history buff. Second, to the extent that I know World War II history, I think very much of like the ground invasions. I think of, the trenches, kind of the things that we've seen on the big screen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Storming Normandy and so forth. Then to the extent I know a little bit about like the dogfighting, right? Where you've got, the single pilot planes, that engage in kind of like dogfighting with the Luftwaffe. I guess I kind of like was ignorant and didn't really think about, the massive bombers, which I think is like B-52s or B-42s. I'm not sure if that's actually the model of the plane, but they have a crew of about 10 to 12. And the way that they've done the bombing missions, apparently, and of course, given that this is brought to you by the producers of Band of Brothers in the Pacific, you would expect it to be, quite historically accurate.
Right.
So the folks load up in these things. There's pilot, co-pilot, right? And it's like they're flying a big Airbus or Boeing, 747. And then, of course, they've got the navigator, and then they've got kind of like the bombardier. And then they've got, kind of folks who are like the gunners, right? And generally how it goes, which I learned, which I think is fascinating, and then I'll get into the show itself. But apparently the British would only do night bombing missions because it was safer. On the ground of Germany, there's anti-aircraft guns. And then, of course, they would send up, the Luftwaffe, which is kind of the fighter planes, to try to shoot down, the British. So the British would only bomb in the evening because it was safer, of course. But the British also did this because they were just, the term carpet bombing. The British were just bombing. So they would say generally like, hey, we're over Berlin, let it rip. And they would just bomb indiscriminately, right? The US apparently had a very good technology, which was this type of, I'm going to get this wrong, like if you think of a periscope, but the opposite of a periscope, where they could actually use this device to look down while they're in the plane, and it was very, very clear and accurate, and they could actually identify the specific targets that they wanted to hit. the US bombers would actually fly during the day because of course it doesn't work at night. They can't see at night. So they would fly during the day. So the benefit for the US was they were much more accurate. So if they wanted to take out a factory making ball bearings, they would get the intelligence of where that factory is. And they could, with this scope, while they're in the plane, they could say, hey, we're right over the target. I see it. Now is the time to, open the bomb doors and drop the bombs, right?
Okay.
I mean, these weren't smart bombs. They were just taken by gravity and they would just bomb. So there was less collateral damage. So which on a humanitarian side, that's great. But because they were flying during the day, it was much, much riskier. And the casualties were much, much higher. So that was the difference between the U.S. bombers and the British bombers. And the U.S. bombers were, of course, stationed in the UK. And then they'd fly what I guess is the channel, or at least I refer to it as a channel, into, German airspace. They would drop bombs, and then they would do one of two things. They would turn around and go back to the UK, or they would go straight and they would kind of like go south through Europe and end somewhere in like Africa and land there.
Okay.
In an airbase in like Tunisia or Egypt or something like that. I thought from a historical perspective, that was really, really fascinating because I didn't really know about that. So again, the British folks would go at night under the cover of darkness. It was safer, but they were less accurate and, there's more collateral damage. US folks would go during the day, much more dangerous. So usually they would have a squadron of like fighter jets, kind of accompanying them. But due to, I guess, like fuel restrictions, the fighter jets couldn't stay with them the entire time. So at some point, these big flying fortresses, these big bombers were on their own. And apparently there was a lot of casualties, both because of the anti-aircraft guns on the ground, and also because, the Luftwaffe, the German Luftwaffe was pretty good. And as you can imagine, I mean, if you kind of think about, let's put it into our terms, Pete, TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon, right?
Right.
every
you
now
got me back on board.
So if you think about like some of the scenes, right, where Han is piloting the Falcon, Luke is sitting, by that little gun trying to get the TIE fighter. The TIE fighter is very difficult to shoot because it's smaller, it's very maneuverable, right? And Luke is just one guy sitting at that gunning station, trying to get it. That's very similar to what these large bombers had for all the different, like German aircraft that They're going very, very fast. It's hard to get a beat on them. And of course, you have to be very, very accurate. Not easy to do, right? I mean, basically, they're just spewing as many bullets as they can. And again, this is bullets back then, right? I mean, manually trying to hit aircraft, which as you can imagine is not at all easy. Whereas the German craft just need to kind of like shoot a few bullets into the side of the plane and suddenly it loses hydraulics or it can't steer or it loses altitude. They were kind of sitting ducks, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. A lot of damage. And if you've seen Band of Brothers or the Pacific, you know that there's a lot of blood and guts and cartilage and human tissue in those movies. And this is no different. That I mean, they show a lot of folks getting like really shot up, and it seemed to be a very, very brutal. You would think that the folks in these bombers were much safer than kind of the ground forces. And I guess if you and I had a choice, I would definitely prefer to be in the air than on the ground. But definitely it was not without risk. And so that's the background, the historical background that shows a little bit. And then, of course, when you go through the 9 episodes, there is a whole, it's a story, right? In terms of, this 100th fleet and, you get to know the different personalities and, how they're friends and a little bit of backstories. And of course, they're in different airplanes. Some of them get shot down. So of course there's casualties, characters die. Some of them are shot down and they're taken as POWs, which is another storyline. And then, of course, there's the original Catch-22, right? I mean, which is where the phrase comes from. So Catch-22, the phrase, I think you know the phrase, which basically means the more you do, the more you get sucked in. And it actually started from a book, which is called Catch 22. But the historical reason was that it applied to first the folks who were in the fighter jets and said, look, if you shoot down 22 enemy aircraft, you are out. Your service to the military is done. You're out, right? And it was an incentive to, shoot down a lot of folks. And then they were given a reward, which is they were supposedly supposed to be discharged. It turns out that then once they realized folks got to 22, they would raise the bar and say, well, now it's not going to be 22, it's going to be 34. And the reason they did that was twofold. One, those are obviously the best fighter pilots.
Right.
So you don't want to discharge your most talented employees. And second, there was just like an absence of, they needed bodies, right? So they moved the goalpost, so to speak. So the same thing was present in Masters of the Air, where it was originally, hey, if you fly, I'm going to forget the number, 30 missions, you're out, you're discharged. And then, of course, after they got to 30, there would be a proclamation or like a new order, right? Saying, actually, it's not 30, now it's 34. And of course, everyone's like so disappointed. They told their families, wives, they were going to see their baby, so on and so forth. They're going to be discharged. Then they have to like emotionally get back into the swing of things because they've got 4 more missions, right? Once they hit 34, then it's 38, then it's 42, then it's so on and so forth, right? So there was an element of that in this as well. So I've given away maybe a few spoilers, which we are apt to do in this segment. But overall, I have to say, I watched all 9 episodes and I really liked it. And I can qualify that by saying I'm not really a World War II guy. That's not my genre. That's not my era. I said at the beginning, I'm not really a history buff. So, I mean, if you were just to tell me the profile of the show, I would not have immediately said, oh, that's something that I like, right? Like you and I love sci-fi, for example. Oh, we love, time transport, for example. You love heist movies.
Right.
You love Nick Cage. So, I mean, this doesn't kind of fall within my natural genre, but I have to say it was very, very well done. It won at least one award. If you don't know, the headliner is Austin Butler.
Yeah.
Right? Elvis himself. Also, interestingly, Anthony Boyle. Do you know this guy?
Sounds familiar.
Have you watched Manhunt?
I have not.
He plays Booth on Manhunt. Manhunt is about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and he plays John Wilkes Booth.
Yes.
Yeah. So Anthony Boyle is heavily now into Apple TV Plus with these 2 shows, but I recognized him from that. And the other star is a gent named Calum Turner, who I didn't recognize, but he's got a pretty good biop on IMDb. The cast is actually quite well represented. I like the story. I think it's really good. It's got a lot of good action. It's like all good, limited series have. It's got kind of like multiple different storylines, intertwined. Now we get to where the rubber hits the road, ratings, right? This to me is just below a must subscribe. It is absolutely great, kind of binge worthy as well. But I have to say it is just a little bit below a must subscribe, primarily because none of the storylines or the characters have really made me fall in love with them. No one is unlikable, which I think is very, very unique for a TV series, right? Like a lot of TV series prey on the person who's like the lightning rod, like either you really like them or you just cannot stand them.
Yeah.
There's no one in this show at all who's really a lightning rod. There's no one that I think. I'd be surprised if you watched it and you're like I just hate that guy, cannot stand him or cannot stand her, whatever the case may be, right? No one is really unlikable here, which is great. I mean, it makes it very easy to watch, right? It makes it easy to continue on with the show when there's no one that you really dislike. But I have to say, none of the storylines none of the friendships, none of the relationships, none of the emotional trauma or the hard decisions, none of these multiple storylines really grabbed me and captivated me and kept me locked in. The action is good. I have to say, like, there's a lot of air combat sequences. There is a good amount of action. You know, it has a good mixture of personal storylines and backstory and, you know, dialogue on the ground as well. But there's not a single character that I loved or felt like really aligned with. And there wasn't any real storyline that I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy what's happening between these two, or that's nuts how this guy got this, right?
So not even Austin Butler?
Look, Austin Butler definitely gets the star treatment in this. At first, I didn't really recognize him because he looks very different. And of course, he's always wearing like an aviator jacket and a hat and such, where he is the too cool for school kind of pilot. Yeah. Like he is definitely got all his crap together. You know, he's the good leader. He's the good human being, always does the right thing. He's the confidant of everyone. He never stresses out. Like he's always like, no, we've got to do this. It's the right thing to do, even if we die doing it, you know, like, and I feel like I like him in real life as a dude, but his character was a little bit too goody two shoes, perfect, like no dirt under his nails to like really feel like a compelling character.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say we like our heroes with flaws, but I think you and I
gives them a little bit of texture, right?
Yeah, we see Han Solo as the redeeming qualities, right? And kind of overlook his faults. There were no faults with this dude. He was just the loyal husband, the loyal friend, the great leader, kind of like the Will Smith treatment in the good old days, right? Pre-slap. You know, we're like, you know, like, right? Like Independence Day, right? Like, he's got the perfect wife. He's got the perfect job. Even like Bad Boys, right? I mean, he's like, I just want to be a cop. I just want to like do good for people. Don't worry about my money or where I came from. You know, I'm just dedicated to this job. Again, none of the storylines really, really grabbed me. If you said this was a must subscribe, dude, I wouldn't fight you about it. I would say that's a perfect, I wouldn't. I would say that's a perfectly acceptable opinion. It wouldn't be a hot take. To be honest, we wouldn't debate. I'd be like, yeah, I can see that. You know, if someone said, hey, there's no way you should watch this. This is a skip. I'd probably like have a good debate about that, saying, come on, it's not a skip. This is a great show. And it is a great show. I just think it's not a show that I would pay Apple TV Plus for only to watch. But like I said, I watched all 9 episodes. I kind of binged it. It's not hard to get into. You know, you and I have both watched shows that we've said, I didn't like it at first, but then it kind of like the slow burn, right?
Yeah.
We both know the slow burn. It's not a slow burn where like it kind of grew on me. Immediately after the first episode, you're like, yeah, this is pretty good. I like it. I want to watch another. I want to watch another. I want to watch another. That being said, let me compare it to like 3 Body Problem, which we saw on Netflix. 3 Body Problem, it's 2 a.m. I want to watch episode 4, right?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't turn that off. Masters of the Air, I can turn it off, you know? Like it's not like I could only watch that until my eyes were just like literally closed. Like that's one where like, hey, that's really good. Do I have time for another? It's getting late. Okay, I'll definitely watch it tomorrow. So I think that's also a relevant test in terms of the must subscribe,
right,
binge-worthy test. So in any case, that is Masters of the Air. Very good. Seems to be very historically authentic and something different from a World War II perspective. If World War II is your thing, I would expect that you would love this. If you really, really don't like World War II, you probably won't give a hoot about it.
Wonderful. Okay.
What do you got this week?
while you were happily watching Masters of the Air, I was initially trying to watch 11, 22, 63, 75 hike, but I could not watch it for whatever reason. I don't know why. I couldn't
It's on
find it.
Hulu. It's on Hulu, right?
Yeah, well, it's not on Hulu for me. So I thought, oh, it could be
Oh,
one of those international things where it might be on
yeah.
Disney Plus, and I couldn't find it on Disney Plus either. So it was a bit of a treasure
Let
hunt
down.
to find, and I couldn't find
Yeah.
it. So I pulled an Audible
Oh.
and I watched Twisted Metal on Peacock.
Is that based on a video game?
It is based on a video game, and I'm not surprised
Oh.
that you would recognize that. It was PlayStation's, let's say, marquee game in, let's say, in the mid 90s. It was
Whoa.
one of the first major PlayStation games that kind of like blew everyone out of the water. It was like a rated R version of Mario Kart because it was basically a destruction derby game where you get to choose your car, you can fire bullets and rockets and other kinds of weapons at other cars, and your goal was to destroy all the other cars in the arena and survive as long as possible.
Did you play?
I did play the game long time ago. I honestly hadn't even thought about it. It's one of those properties which is so weird that you would think you couldn't imagine them making a TV series or a movie out of it. Like it's a bit odd,
Hmm.
but they did it. They did it. It stars Anthony Mackie, who we all know
Huh.
from the MCU.
Yeah, yeah.
Stephanie Beatriz, who's probably most famous for her role as Rosa Diaz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, yeah.
Will Arnett.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he plays a voice.
I
He's
love Job.
yeah, exactly, Job. And Thomas Hayden Church.
Oh,
So
man.
on paper, pretty substantial cast if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
The premise is that we're set in a post-apocalyptic world and America has kind of turtled in. It's kind of like a Fallout, which is to say all these little cities have created like walled structures for themselves where like they are safe havens, and
Okay.
everything outside of the city walls are basically like the wastelands, and it's like this danger zone.
Okay.
And Anthony Mackie plays, I mean, he's basically a delivery driver, and he
Okay.
delivers, food, medicine, weapons, car parts, etc., from one city to the next, and he gets paid for that.
Okay.
And that's his job. The premise is that he takes on a job to go from California to Chicago. And Chicago is known for being this super, super dangerous place. And along the way, he meets one of the bad guys from the original video game. I don't know what it's going to be like in this series. He meets Sweet Tooth. He meets Stephanie Beatrice's character. And it's positioned as an action comedy. And I use comedy very loosely. Yeah, that is to say, it's clear that they're trying to make this a comedic take, but it didn't land for me. Like the
Oh.
dialogue didn't land for me, the action sequences didn't land for me. It's like on the side of being a little gory. It's they try to use the humor of the Fallout TV series, but they don't land, which is surprising because the Fallout TV series came out now in 2024 and Twisted Metal is from 2023.
Oh, this is first.
Yeah. It's clear that they spent a lot of money on this show, but it still somehow looks cheap, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
really?
Yeah, like it looks almost like one of those old-fashioned 70s era B movies. And I don't know, man. It didn't land for me. I didn't like it. I thought it was a total skip. It was just not my cup of
Yee.
tea. I didn't have any expectations for it, which is a good thing.
I mean, do you think it's strange that Anthony Mackie's in the show on Peacock? I mean, like, is that a referendum on his desire to be affiliated with a video game franchise, or that his star has fallen and he's only getting Peacock. Because if this was like an Amazon show, he could be like, oh, it's Amazon, not really sure about the show, but what do you think is his mindset joining this?
I gotta imagine it's because of the property. I gotta imagine it's Twisted Metal because I don't think it's a Peacock thing. I don't think it's a Star Has Fallen thing. He's still the new Captain America.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you could say his star power has fallen, right? So I don't think it's a case where someone's just like, let's throw this guy a bone. I think it's just him saying, hey, I really loved Twisted Metal when I was growing up, and I would love to be associated with that.
It's so difficult when you're making the decision to join an intellectual property, and like it's like a trust fall, right? Like you're really not sure if it's going to turn out like Halo, if it's going to turn out like Twisted Metal, if it's going to turn out like The Last of Us, right? I mean, it's really a trust fall with some of these things where you say, okay, I'll sign up for it. Like I'll be the lead, but are you sure it's going to be something that's going to be well received by the audience,
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So I was just a bit surprised that, let's put it this way. I'm not surprised that he did it. I am surprised that it turned out as poor as it did. I also think it's one of the few properties where I don't think it naturally makes sense for them to turn it into a TV series. It's not like the video game was
Yeah.
known for having a phenomenal story.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point because I mean, something should have one of three things. It should have a huge brand, it should have a great story, or it should kind of like lend itself to being a series or a movie, right? And it sounds like for Twisted Metal, I mean, the brand alone doesn't carry it, and it doesn't have like really any story that would like automatically transition. Like it doesn't write itself. You have to basically create a script and a storyline for it.
Right, exactly. It was interesting seeing it on screen.
Yeah.
Again, you can tell they definitely spent money. It's not like the effects are bad, and they've got the gore, they've got a lot of it is what I would consider to be faithful to the video game, at least in spirit.
Yeah.
But again, as you just said, does that translate to a good story? No, that falls down to the writers, really. Yeah, like The Last of Us, which we all loved last year, that made sense.
Yeah. The storyline
This is the equivalent of the Barbie movie, which is to say, let's take an established property and then let's make a fictional movie out of it or a fictional story out of it. Well, yeah, that only works if the story or if the movie is written well. And in this case, I'm not so confident that it is.
Yeah. I agree with you though. Like there's a level of humor in a show like this that really needs to hit. And if it doesn't hit, then like it kind of throws off the whole timing and the whole watchability of the piece, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Disappointing because Will Arnett is usually known to attach himself to like extraordinarily funny stuff, right?
Generally speaking, absolutely. And in this case, he plays Sweet Tooth, but only the voice. They have another character actor play the actual physical character, and he just voices him. It again, like that's a great example. Sweet Tooth doesn't land for me. He's supposed to be like this scary clown villain from the first game. Again, I haven't played the game in 30 years, so I don't remember, but it didn't feel creepy. It felt forced. I don't know. I didn't enjoy it.
That's a skip.
It is unfortunately a skip. And again, the only reason I watched this was because I couldn't watch the JFK miniseries. But if I can, I will update our list accordingly.
Okay. So that's Streamer Skip. We've got one skip. We've got one mooch encroaching on must subscribe territory. What do we have next week? What are the assignments?
So next week, you and I are both on Netflix.
Oh.
You are watching a show which I am actually very keen on watching called Once Upon a Crime.
I like how you say it. Once Upon a Crime.
Exactly. And I will be watching a show called A Man in Full.
Once Upon a Crime. Do you know anything about it?
I do. I don't know how much I want to tell you, but I do know that it is a Korean show from what I understand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's basically a Korean take on fairy tales.
Here's the IMDb synopsis. While at the royal ball with Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood finds herself in the middle of a mystery. Can she solve the case before midnight strikes? Okay. So I have Once Upon a Crime. And what do you have?
I've got A Man in Full.
What is that?
I don't know. You put it on my list.
A Man in Full?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do know what this is. It's with Jeff Daniels.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen the screenshot on Netflix, but I never watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, I saw, like it kind of popped up on Netflix and you see like the trailer thingy.
Yeah.
I thought that looked actually quite solid.
Okay.
Lucy Liu's in it as well, by the way.
Oh, you had me at Lucy Liu.
I've got high expectations for that for you, actually. I don't know if I've got must subscribe high expectations, but I've got binge-worthy expectations.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Pete, I'm looking forward to this next week. Let's see what we've got.
Indeed. But until then, if you guys have any strong thoughts about Twisted Metal or Masters of the Air, or Once Upon a Crime or A Man in Full, do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can tweet at us at F&S Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. And as always, you should like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, leave a comment below, all that YouTube jazz. It helps us out greatly.
Indeed. Pete, appreciate your time today. Listeners, appreciate your ears today. We will see you next week on the Films and Stuff podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ethan.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.